where do we start? Well, we start with Darwin and his idea of natural selection. And it is a remarkably simple idea. Gary Larson summarized it very easily. And natural selection, if it's very simple. Within a species, and we're all the same species, there's variety. And some of that variety is heritable. We look like aspects of our parents. And those heritable traits, which augment success and augment survival and reproductive success, are the traits that become instantiated in the organism. And again, these traits, you want to think of, well, let me back up a second. Natural selection is the only workable explanation we have for the variety and complexity of life. It is the only workable explanation that we have for the design of complex functional organisms. And all their constituent parts, from membranes to minds. You're going to hear me talking about cognitive adaptations, traits. And the way to think about adaptations, they're problem solvers. They're functional. Now, what does this mean? The heart solves the problem of pumping blood. The lungs solve the problem of extracting oxygen from the air. Hemoglobin solves the problem of transporting oxygen. At every level of biological inquiry, from membranes to minds, you want to think adaptations. Another way of thinking about this is the mind is what the brain does, and the brain evolved, like every other piece of living tissue, by Darwinian natural selection, and is made up of very complex adaptations. Now, I said from molecules to minds. Here's a way to think about the history of life. If this is the beginning of life, replicating RNA molecules here, okay? This is the present day here. So my arm span is about 4 billion years, okay? So we have replicating molecules arise 4 billion years ago. And through Darwinian natural selection, 3.5 billion years, life is basically cells, bacteria. It took 3.5 billion years for the extraordinary complexity of the cell to evolve. And basically molecular biology in the last 50 years has been unlocking the keys to that. So finally, about here, 2.5 billion years ago, cells come together. You want to think flat ones. Okay? This is the origin of central nervous systems, about 800 million years ago. Then the dinosaurs show up about the middle of my right palm. The dinosaurs go extinct about the last joint of my finger. And that's when our earliest ancestors show up, mammals, primates. Okay. Hominids, Lucy, shows up about the white of my fingernail. And all of recorded history, from the Sumerians to George Bush, the dust of one light file, of a fingernail file. Okay. That's the evolution of life. Okay. A way to think about this in terms of our minds is the Apollo spacecraft. What is the Apollo spacecraft? It's this complex, compact set of engineering devices, each one designed to solve a particular problem. Okay. Constantly solving those problems and adjusting the behavior of the spacecraft. That's the way to think about the brain or the human mind. Is this complex array of engineering devices, 98% of which are unconscious. Okay. Only the problems that we were solving for most of our evolutionary history were not in space. Okay. We are basically not fallen angels. We're risen apes, all of us. In a sense, we're African apes. And if you want to understand the origins of humans, you have to go back to Africa and the Great Rift Valley along here. You want to think of this as the birth canal of the human species. This is where we evolved. This is your family history. You may not know it. This is be a common ancestor with chimpanzees. We share 98.4% of our DNA with chimps. The chimp-bonobo line goes off this way. This is the hominid line. This is our family history. Lucy, Australopithecines, 4 million years ago. Our genus Homo shows up about 2 million years ago. And think about it, during this time, the human brain is evolving, coming up with problem-solving devices to negotiate the environment. Increasingly, the most challenging part of that environment is each other. Again, about 2 million years ago, Homo erectus leaves Africa, makes it all the way to Indonesia without language, small groups without language, starting to conquer the world. About 500,000 years ago, Heidelbergensis leaves Africa, and one strain of Heidelbergensis becomes the Neanderthals. And then this just shows the evolution, and look particularly in the frontal lobe area. This is Lucy, Homo erectus, 2 million years ago. This is us. The selective pressure for the push to evolve the brain in this era is primarily frontal lobe, basically the social part of your brain. Anatomically modern Homo sapiens, about 100,000 years ago. The genes for language, apparently about 60,000 years ago. And this shows you the spread of our species. So, fully formed, anatomically, behaviorally modern human beings, us, shows up in Africa about 60,000 years ago and conquers the world. This again is just another, this is the common ancestor, the original Homo sapiens, and this is everybody on Earth. We shouldn't be fooled by our different religious, ethnic differences. Underneath our skins, we are all Africans. We are all the sons and daughters of a small band of hunter-gatherers that got down to about 2,000 breeding individuals about 70,000 years ago, survived the climate change, the climate crunch then, and conquered the world. And, oops. So, when you think of the evolution of the human mind, the environment that we evolved in is an environment that has now long passed. Okay? The environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, the EEA, is a small hunter-gatherer group of about 150 individuals, probably 80% of whom are kin. Okay? And that is how we have spent most of our history, even as fully formed Homo sapiens, behaviorally modern Homo sapiens. Up until the year 1500 AD, 2/3 of the world population was still small hunter-gatherers. Okay? So the cognitive mechanisms, the things I'm going to be talking about that generate religious belief, are things that evolved long ago in this context and solve particular problems.